I'm going to speak about handmade architecture, as the title was provided, more from the point of view about thinking with the hands. Rather than only just making the architecture with the hands, I would like to talk about the role of our hands in developing designs and everything else and ideas. Because in an age of over-standardization and over-industrial and now digital technologies, it's interesting to look at how the human being may be alienated a little bit from their immediate environment and the way it is produced. I would like to, sorry, the slides were like horizontal, so everything has become in a little different proportion. So you have to imagine later that the architecture is more stretched horizontally. I want to, before I discuss the work, I would like to show you a few of the images of the context in which I grew up in Bombay, and what are the issues that has shaped my thinking that are, I think, relevant even in the rest of the world, even in Istanbul, because we have got a lot of similarities in those kinds. We are 1/6 of the population, and China 1/6. So only India and China, we are 1/3. Every third person is Indian or Chinese. And the land we have, proportionately, and the resources also, is only 2.4% of the world's land. So we have this type of growing population, but even the global population and the fact that every city is expanding without limits, this is one concern. How much is scalable? How much is there a limit when we talk about sustainability? This is a question for me, the population and the shared resources. Another key quality is the phenomenon that is happening is that all the agricultural society in the world is slowly moving into cities. And in many parts of the world, not slowly, but very rapidly moving in the cities. So migration, which is not only a rural-urban migration formerly, now there is globalization-related migration, political and war and peace, and there is a lot of migration. So cities are not able to cope with the way they are structured and how much new housing and everything has to be created for the migrants, and nobody is from somewhere. Well, slowly we are losing our roots. So this is one of the concerns. And another concern is how much ever we are impressed with smart cities and intelligent buildings. I am also worried that what is the society if the buildings and materials and cities are intelligent, but the people don't need to be intelligent anymore. It's okay if the city is smart and the people are stupid. Or if, I'm concerned about only the objects becoming intelligent and us becoming passive. Also, how much ever we believe in all these technologies, in the end of the day, the food is going to be not digital. It's analog. We need the oxygen we need. It cannot be as polluted as it is because of the cars. So there are some things which will always be physical and real. How is that negotiated with the unreal dreams we are having? The whole conversation would not need to be had if we don't have sustainability issues. The reason why I'm presenting this work today is because the current way of building in the mainstream is causing huge environmental imbalances, but also social and economic imbalances. And we want to find new technologies to solve that. We are not looking whether our technology themselves is causing the problem. We feel because of capitalism and many other interests, we feel that we cannot question the fundamental things. We don't want to question our greed, our need for more and more, and that we are actually creating man-made urban poverty in every place, and we are depleting the planet and so on. So this is one issue. Here, for example, you see that the globalization forces that are entering small areas, and in the developing countries, and creating aspirations to have the glass tower building as a symbol of a future of centrally air-conditioned, buildings. We used to have the knowledge to live in any climate where there is a human settlement. We used to live, all our ancestors lived with many more resources, and they have quite good lives. They have managed to spend their life living and surviving without so much reliance on artificial climate. Today, we are not even giving some people permissions if they don't introduce such degree of, we are creating a standard that in fact the planet cannot deliver. If every Asian, African, everybody has to have the same standard as the developed countries, some people calculated that we need 7 planets. We can only have it in the developed countries because a lot of people don't even have electricity in this world, and who don't have one light to read and do their homework in the evening. So we are creating an aspiration which we have to question. You see, this is in outskirts of Delhi. You see the upper part of some buildings, they look like Dubai and Singapore, but the down part looks like farmers, and there are pigs and cows and no infrastructure, because we do not have the means to provide this kind of infrastructure in advance. This is happening in the rest of the world actually, not only in India. And finally, the most worrying element is that what we are creating all over the world is a social segregation of an unprecedented level. The number of people who used to live in the early times in slums, or the people who used to be poor earlier, were because they didn't have jobs and they have other realities, or they were farmers and it didn't rain, or poverty is a different phenomenon from urban poverty. Urban poverty is occurring in all the cities now, in even developed countries, where the salary that people earn, all these people have jobs. They are not like the other poor. They are people who have not only one job, maybe they have 2 jobs, and they work in the evening, and the salary is not enough to cover the food and clothes, leave alone the house and education and healthcare. So this is a life where the type of development we are doing, it means that only the elitist people can have those type of buildings, and it means that all the rest of the people has to have this kind of growing polarity, and you have an urban form which is of classes. You have not in all the countries you see, and even in European countries, you have the city versus the periphery. So even here you have this, I've been seeing the old city, and what happens in the periphery are 2 types, the poor ones and like this area with the towers and the cars. But in any case, there is no more city quality, no public space, only for the cars and for the people to be lonely and live in never see anyone else. So whether you're rich or poor, it's all poor in terms of architectural and city design quality. So these were my main concerns when I graduated and started my practice. And my practice is 27 years old, and all the things I do are influenced by the fact that I grew up in Bombay, in overwhelming problems where you feel no matter what I do, it cannot solve anything. But as architects, we are very optimistic people. So it's natural that you want to give hope to yourself through your work. And that's what I did. One more issue I want to raise here before we talk about materials, local materials, is that now the reinforced cement concrete architecture is become like a vernacular material. Even though it's an industrialized thing, if you go to every country, even every park bench is made in reinforced concrete. Why? Because of 2 reasons, I think. One is it is a habit, and 2 is the more worrying one, is I think they don't have the knowledge anymore to build with. People give all excuses, even engineers and all, they say, oh no, they can't even design a load-bearing wall. Brick is made for a wall. You see the hugest things here made with brick. And in all the developed countries now, brick is used for everything but to take weight. They are not allowed because they say, no, maybe there will be an earthquake, or no, we have to put the steel here. And everybody doesn't want to calculate, like the Eladio Dieste walls, the buttresses. This requires knowledge. I believe today, in the early days, I believed that engineers were convincing us about the norms and all those things. But today, I know for sure it's because of lack of knowledge that people are afraid to build the good way. Because they would need to know how to make an arch. They have to know a lot of things. To make a slab, you put it in a software and you know what steel you have to put. You have not to work. So there is, I believe, laziness is behind this. So I am very angry about that. Because also I'm a teacher of architecture and I think we cannot accept this reason. So I am concerned that in India, for example, we have so many languages, so many types of food. Here also you have so much diversity. And according to the geographical, climatic, territorial conditions, you have different materials. And the people have learned how to use that, just like they have learned how to build for the climate. And now, neither they know how to use the materials that are there, or they also don't know how to live in the climate, which is a very basic thing for architects. So people have no knowledge now of first principles. You have to go to very special, expensive consultants to know the same thing which our grandfathers knew, even if they are not architects. So this is a worry. So my whole process of my work, I realized, is the lack of knowledge that is irritating for me as an architect. All the excuses around me, everything came down to that. So I thought that I would like to use every architecture project as an opportunity to build knowledge, not only to build buildings, but to build knowledge so that when one building is over, because a building cannot be made by one man, it can be made, well, if it is made by machines, then maybe. But if it is made by people, then a lot of people learn a lot of things when they finish a building, and we can go on spreading knowledge with each project. So we want to build architecture. Is the two meanings were for me is to, first of all, recover a knowledge, to find the knowledge, to be able to build appropriately to our current context. But the more interesting point for me became the opportunity to actually build a communities and build knowledge among people. So there is an empowerment that people, instead of feeling that they cannot contribute to their own housing, they can in fact, they can directly feel more confidence to improve their living conditions. I was just speaking a little while ago, that how the birds and the bees and many animals makes their house. They don't need any norms and permissions. They are born, they finish the house in 1 or 2 days, and they get on with their lives. In our society, we have created a society now that we are not allowed to build. We are not allowed to even paint anything. We have to pay specialists because we ourselves made some norms that are very hard to employ. Like, we are not allowed to do anything. We have to pay a third party. Already we don't have money for housing. So we have to become informal because the formal world is not letting us participate in any aspect of building a house with a lot of excuses. The point is, the basic need of human beings to have a shelter. The meaning of the house was to have a home to live. Now, the adults children, if you ask them what is a house for, they say it's for living. If you ask the adults, they say a house is an investment. It's not for living. And you see the cities looks like that, investment of everybody trying to profit from the need of someone who will need a house. And then the owner has to take a loan from the bank. The developer is taking another loan also, and the owner has to pay 2 times. So there is all this speculation. It's like tomorrow they will sell oxygen to us. It's the basic need we want. If it should not be used for speculation. So cities have to rethink in this condition and provide opportunities. Even if we can be very developed, industrial, whatever, people must be able to contribute. This is my feeling. So with these thoughts, I have, in the Venice Architecture Biennale recently, I have, when Aravena invited me to be there, I showed a project called Building Knowledge, where I showed all the work I did in all the 27 years as an example of talking about the roots, not the fruits, not the outcome of projects, but talking about the processes. Because if the tree has a strong roots, the fruits will go on coming. If you focus on the fruit, you take it and it's finished, no use. So it's important for me to talk about these roots. So how does the process start for me? It begins by whenever I have a project, I try to look at, when I look at local materials, I look at, first of all, architecture has to be rooted in the place. Even if the knowledge is universal, the application must land on the ground and be anchored in the place. So the place, when we start unearthing the roots, I always don't see the material as a cold, dead matter. I look at life that is sustained or intermingled with the materials. So, I look at livelihoods of people. What are the people, what were they doing in that place to live from that activity when they process materials, when they build buildings? There is a lot of life. If we don't think about life, then there is no need for architecture. I think architecture is a place for spending the life. So the most important is not the architecture, it is that the healthy life goes on. And as architects, I think this is our duty. So when I started looking at materials, for example, when you go to a place and you look at small productions of local areas, if they make bricks, this brick kiln, it is very insignificant in the map of building materials. There will be very big companies making bricks in that area. But for me, it is important, if a big company builds bricks, makes bricks, they use a lot of coal, they get bricks which are a bit stronger, but they create a huge environmental depletion. These people, they use in the local way of making bricks, which are 3,800 years old. Till now in Africa, Asia, the local people do this bricks where they grow the trees themselves and they take the small leaves and branches with which they plan the cycle, in the agricultural cycle in the territory. So when they are not planting, they are using the harvesting and doing bricks, because in the monsoon they cannot do anything. So there is the clay, then there's a large relationship of this livelihood into the place. So for me, this was the important thing, not only using the local brick. The reason to use the local brick is that if I suddenly use a factory brick, not only is the environmental damage more, but all the livelihood is displaced overnight. If I use you can see when these people are busy and working over centuries, they still don't have the education to do something else. So overnight they become poor overnight, and then they have to live in the slums. These are very direct things I experienced by roaming around in these areas. And this is a lime kiln. These people are doing this from generations. They wake up in the morning and they make lime. Now if I come from a city with a graduation in architecture and I don't think about it. If you consciously use Portland cement, it's okay. But unconsciously, just because I didn't hear about lime, then that means I order lime in a rural area and there's going to be trucks coming in. All this we will be introducing, and that's what we have done to the whole world. So I have been with a lot of interest looking at what the people are doing over generations with the material and all the skills and knowledge they have developed over centuries. Can we let it just go without noticing it? These people were making grinding stones for making masalas for Indian food. We need to grind by hand. By the way, there also machines have intervened. So these people, I'm not attached to them. I'm not nostalgic. I'm a modern contemporary person from Bombay without any roots myself. So I'm not interested to have this recreated. For me, it's very practical. I see that this is knowledge of centuries in stone cutting, compared much better than what the machine has able to deliver, because the machine one is very shiny and all the hotel lobbies reflecting the light of, this is matte finished, hand leveled, a lot of knowledge. So I'm interested, I don't mind the use, it is critical. That's why I'm saying I'm not using vernacular materials. I'm seeing what makes sense there and which knowledge should I develop so that the people who are afraid to lose their livelihood because of urbanization, they have a guaranteed livelihood and they teach other people, because there is a demand for high quality buildings. So I'm critically determining these local materials. So you see, these are the ancient bricks I have used. They are not so level, they are not the best quality, they have less quality, but then the walls are therefore thicker, which is also good for the insulation and all those things. So here I'm doing some invisible design interventions, like here this is a lime mortar, but I use a 10% of cement in this case because lime is very slow. Nobody has time now. So we have to introduce design, I feel, more carefully rather than just have the very stark industrialized solution and the old one. So I like to improve it in a way that is just correct for the situation. These are some images of myself in the very early days, 25 years ago, when I came from Bombay and in a rural area, and I realized that there were all these potters who were not able to sell these pots anymore because nobody is using them anymore for cooking. So I diverted the skills to make them produce high quality roofing elements that could be self-supporting. So all the terracotta that we have traditionally used are supported on a lot of wooden beams, and we don't have wood left. So we started thinking about using catenary curves and bolts where you don't need any support. But the material, the knowledge of the person, see, I did not see those pots, the clay as a material. I did not see these terracotta roofs. So this is my way of critically examining local material. The thing is, I saw the craftspeople who knows how to work with clay. They were making cooking pots. Nobody is going to buy cooking pots in clay now. So they can't sell. But when I see that artisan exists, it means the clay exists. So I go looking for the clay. Then I realize that there is a clay which can be cooked, which can be used something. So that's my method. See, they are being fired instead of coal with coconut shells. So this is all benign. So I started to negotiate high-tech versus low-tech and handmade versus machine-made, not because I am fanatically trying to go back to the past at all. I just feel there are more advantages in some of the ancient ways where knowledge was used to save resources, and it gave, therefore, the resources could give a better life to the people. In the end, I'm just interested in the better life for the resources to give more happiness rather than spend so many resources, have so much loneliness, have to do so much shopping, have to do, it's all going nowhere. So I think when you look at the overall balance, I'm doing it out of practical reasons, okay? Nothing against machine. Also in Europe, they have achieved a social equity and other things which we have not achieved yet in India. So we cannot say that machine made is now the norm. What about all these people who will not be able to contribute and have any job anymore? So these are the kind of using engineering methods to be able to develop roofing systems. I'm calling it thinking with the hands, because if I did not begin with the material, we would not reach this solution. I cannot design everything and then come to the site and then think it will work. There's a lot of prototyping, a lot of thinking with the hands, not only mine, the artisan mainly, who knows a lot of things because he confronts every day his materials. So these were the first kind of projects with these roofs, here you see. There is no structural steel involved. There is high quality insulation. And the craftspeople, this is a traditional cooking pot they used to make, which nobody uses anymore. But I used it as a filler slab to be able to make high quality, efficient, reinforced concrete slabs. That means you can save 2 bars out of 3 of steel, because of the dia grid principle. The efficient concrete slabs require expensive formwork. So I try to make lost shuttering and other intelligent formwork to be able to make intelligent slabs where we don't need insulation, on top of roofs. So these are the types of experiments through which I started developing a material palette. But I want to say here, before talking too much about material experimentation, that for me, architecture is essentially the designing of the void, not of the material. I'm only designing the material because the conventional material practice and habits are causing huge problems in the environment. That's why we need to rethink the material. But I always think we don't have to have that Italian marble coming in and so on, because the real beauty of architecture comes from inhabiting the negative space. And like they say, the function of the pot lies in the nothingness. You can only use the part you did not build. And the proportion of that is free. That doesn't cost anything. It is the air, you know. So the cost, a good budget, big budget, doesn't mean that the film is better. Like the big budget doesn't give a good architecture. It is the other invisible qualities. So why do we have to spend all these materials for what? So that is why I started to do material experimentation, not because I'm obsessed with material, but I'm so sure, I have so much confidence in my capacity to design the void that I know with any material I can do a good architecture. It doesn't have to be some very fancy polluting materials. So the relationship between form and material was also important. So there were, in the same local area, you know, there are experimentations, say, with round wood, where we try to use the whole section of the wood. So instead of the rectangle section, because if you use a rectangle section, the tree has to be 25 years old. But if you use the whole wood, you can cut it in 3 years. So these are the reasons why to rethink some of those elements, and how the form could be related, the relationship of the form and the use affects the decision of the material. So in the local area there are many materials, but one of the deciding factors is the form that is suitable to the activity. The other thing is the fact that in my work you will see a lot of experimentation. Sometimes the experimentation is also radical, because I believe we are looking for radical solutions, and any technology, even if it has a 1 or 2% chance to be successful, it should be tried, and it's okay to fail, because the other one for me is already failed. So I don't feel like I have to try that, you know, it's already 100% a failure. So I prefer to take some risk. In this case, we have done some type of projects like this one. It is about baking mud houses, cooking this house, a mud house in situ. It is developed, it was pioneered by Nader Khalili, Iranian architect, who got the vision, but he did not solve, I think, everything. A Californian potter, Ray Meeker, had taken it up. He was a ceramist. And I also did some houses in this technique. So you have all the materials from the area, earth, that is, you build the house with it, so you don't need cement. The joints are also earth. And instead of taking these materials to the factory to cook them, you cook it in the situ. It's something very experimental. And yes, we have made baked houses. Here you see the whole house is treated as an oven, because normally when you bake bricks in an oven, 40% of the energy you generate goes into the wall again and again. So you have a kiln, and every time you heat 980 degrees centigrade, the heat keeps on, 40% of the heat you generate goes in the same wall of the kiln. So this idea is based on making a kiln, cooking other ceramic elements, but filling the wall. The wall is cooked. The kiln, the house acts as a kiln. The extra heat which would be lost in the wall cooks the house, and then you go and make another house. So you, for the price of a mud house, you aim to get a brick house. So it will not vanish in the rain, you know. So these are just some examples of very radical experiments, which we are also following up academically. This was my PhD thesis. So in the end, when the house is ready, you take out the bricks, you can sell it and recover the cost of your house. So these small village potters who know how to do, we were hoping that they can take it up and give themselves a house. I try that the money should remain in the local economy, that going into the factories. So all the factory people are going to hate me. I'm glad they have not come here for the talk. But the idea is that if as much of the material you take from the site, so you try not to buy as much you can save, you save materials. And as much of the money you have with the budget, give it to the people. That is a direct formula of social equality, to let people earn rather than the materials earn. You know, I prefer they get good paid. So here are some of those works. And this was a finished project. It was an orphanage. And some of these social projects where I do these experiments, there is no budget. So we use experimentation. In the end of it, we have knowledge and they have a house, Then in some of the other projects, we do a lot of technology transfer. For example, these are rammed earth walls. But in this rammed earth also, there is a little bit of cement because we have a huge monsoon. And in this area, they are not using earth. So when we find that there's a good quality of earth, we use a little bit of cement to make it water resistant. And we think that is still local because it's from the place, a little modernization. So some of those things have to be taught. And wherever possible, we try to allow participation so that people who are going to live in the house have the chance to participate. So if in this project there is a lot of rammed earth, so it's very easy for anybody to ram this wall. Anybody can. There are always things like painting windows. There are always many little things that people can do. Anybody can do. Even teenagers can do. So I always think when we design, there should be at least some things that anybody can do. So if they can contribute and reduce the loans to the bank, if possible. So these are some of those. And then finally, we were talking about local materials. So I want to say that one of the local materials I called vernacular material to reinforce concrete. But one of the local materials we are finding now is the urban waste. I'm also putting it under local material because it's a huge amount that we are producing. And if you think the opportunity buildings have to absorb them, I don't want to actually absorb too much because the people will start thinking it's very nice to produce this waste. But nevertheless, sometimes we don't have money to buy materials, or we prefer to first, before buying, use what people are producing as waste. So many experiments are made, like the same roof in Venice in the 2012 Biennale of David Chipperfield. When I was invited, I developed some elements with the Venetian wine bottles and adapting some of their waste to our knowledge. So, or using, creating for that fired housing of mud, which I showed you, the bathroom blocks and all are made with glasses and all these kind of bottles that come out of when you buy medicines. There are some bottles you can't recycle. You can think of how to use them because they are very strong, vitrified, waterproof elements. Many times I'm using from the junk markets all this kind of material to make scaffolding and formwork. Like for $3 we bought all the cycle wheels, and for all the window we correct the design to use this, so we save a lot of money. And the kind of things of thinking with the hands that I want to specifically show, the fact that right from the day one, when we don't just start with a drawing board, we research, find materials, we start doing things, not only with the architectural team, but with others, to start building. Look, it's funny that I'm putting books under building waste or urban waste. The truth is, books are a huge source of urban waste. It will be shocking to know in Spain, people have to burn books. In Australia, they have to pulp books. Nobody talks about it because it shocks us. But we are producing too many books. We are not able to sell them. And when no libraries, that is very expensive to store. And huge amounts of catalogs you will see that will come out of even this event. There are huge amounts of books. So I wanted to draw attention to this cause, and I was looking at how to build with books, just to make a statement. This is Australia. I did a research and found out that our university and students need opportunity to build with real material. So I always take from urban waste. I find out that they give us huge amounts. You make a phone call, they say, how many trucks do you want? So there is this amount. I had a project in Barcelona. I did the research for it when I was a professor in Australia. So this was the experiment. But when I went to Barcelona, if you all have been to Spain, they are very used to eating delicatessen food, like mostly hams, which are very expensive, and they are vacuum packed. So I thought, it's their vernacular method of extending the life of something. So I thought I'd take the book, vacuum pack the book. I wanted to open the book at least one time before it dies. Vacuum pack open. And we made canopies for outdoor. We assembled these books. And we made all kinds of things, like here we made sofas. We just brought these books and students, and all of us are thinking, what can we do with that? This is what I mean, that without the hands, we would never get this design idea if you don't play with it. So we made many sofas. They are very strong. It's shocking how strong it is. It's still there, this sofa, 4 years old. The back is soft. The front is, the same element is strong. So we learn. See, in the end, I'm not trying to promote architecture made of books, but I want my students to have if they have the chance to look at a book in a new way, in an engineered way, they go back and they will look at the brick with new eyes also. That is important for me. So now I'm also doing experiments with fabric. For example, here you see, these are denim waste in fact from factories in India. You know, the India and China, we are making jeans for all the rest of the world, and all the waste is for us. When the part of the jeans we don't use, and it's causing huge disaster and pollution. So I'm trying to use fabric architectural research exercises to figure out the areas where modern buildings are also not providing fabric architecture anymore in our hot climate. So I am doing this kind of things. For example, this is also urban waste. These are things I have made myself with my own hands. I'm trying to experiment. What can I do to make the fabric more rigid, to use in facades, it's just, this is all experimentation, and it takes a lot of time, and one day maybe I can apply. Then there is another area of academic collaboration. So because as a teacher, I also noticed that students are not finding the opportunity now much to be able to have confrontation with reality. I would like that they don't only go in an internship. I found out even in the internship, they are in the office. They are not confronting reality there also. So I feel that in my studios, when I teach them, I want them to confront 4 realities in the class, in the studio: real place, real people, real scale, and real material, at least for 8 or 10 days. And then they can go back with this, informed by reality, they can make designs. They know the weight of things, they understand engineering, they can synthesize. Architecture as a synthesis of all subjects. They can only synthesize if you bring in reality. If not, all the subjects remain separate. So I'm doing this. This is, for example, when I taught at the AA in London, we took them to build an environmental watchtower. I'm also not saying that many people are doing building workshops. I don't like them to work for a long time making a brick wall. I believe they have to remain as an architect, and there are also artisans who they work with, so that they don't have to start from their low quality of experience, work with the best people, and know how to be in your position as an architect alongside many people who know and make things. And see here, they are doing fabric experiments. These are what happens in the workshops. Like I bring, to do tensile structures, I bring the swing machine, give them, these boys who have never touched the machine, they have to do it for the models, and they enjoy. This is other experiments in schools with books. All of this. You discover properties and become curious about every material. This is made with Tetra Pak in Mexico City. We filled the sand or water back because the material is impossible to disintegrate. 4 materials, aluminium, plastic, and all that. They don't know what to do with Tetra Pak, so they are pressing it with more chemicals and making boards. But then you're putting so much more harm in it. So another industry has to be created. So we tried to use it. See, even I'm not saying we should build this, but if you have a student workshop, it doesn't cost me anything. I went to Mexico. We did a 2-day workshop. They learn the weight of a brick without buying a brick. They take the Tetra Pak, put water, whatever. In the end, they learn how forces behave, how geometry relates to structural stability, how can large and heavy things stand, how form has to give input into the engineering. And that's the experience that I want to leave them with. So I do a lot of things with students without buying anything. This is an installation where when you do parties or something, you have to distribute water. This was for the Hay Festival in Segovia. You can always pile up interesting structures, and in the end, you distribute the water and there's nothing, but you have the knowledge afterwards. So these are some of my methods, and the final thing I'm showing you is in ferrocement, a material I'm researching now, which is like reinforced concrete but actually behaves very different because we use very fine dimensioned chicken mesh and distribute it inside the cement plaster. So it's only 2.5 centimeters thick, and the very fine distribution of steel means you use very little steel. So you create incredibly lightweight structures that anybody can make. So using again engineering and form to be able to make more square meters of voids with the same amount of material. So it's very interesting for architects because we are challenged by designing forms for a structural, rational reason. So here I was looking at origami crease patterns, which have historically been able to stiffen very thin sheets of paper. The same type of concept applied to thin ferrocement can allow us to produce, see, these are the craftsmen, everybody is working on it together. And in order to do this method, you need to make full-scale prototypes at a very early stage. So in this case, because the ferrocement shelter is so thin and light, another area which is difficult is the form work. It's so expensive to make this efficient form work for shells. And so I'm trying to use recycled carton to make the form work. The form work can be closed like that, carried if it's a disaster relief or suddenly you have to produce a house, you can carry it like this, fold the mesh also, take it to the site, and then build a structure. Now this is not an architecture, it was a prototype for a housing project. This is a test with only 4 meters, it could be much bigger, you know. So these are the kind of methods I'm working on right now because I'm trying to compete with the budget of a hut. And this house this was built in 4 days. So I'm trying to liberate the people from this tedious thing of building a house is forever, paid forever, and all of that. So we have to be more attractive. See, the slum dwellers are already enterprising and they are building their solutions. So we have to be in the same speed and same material and cost to be able to be relevant. So now the same ferrocement material, I'm also working on a prefabricated method, which I am not producing it in a factory. I am producing it in the houses of masons that they can produce, they can have extra money in the evenings and weekends. So we don't have to lose any money. They make boxes like large ferrocement bricks, ergonomically designed to accommodate the furniture requirements and storage of people. So we let them produce these in the common spaces in the village and all that, and teach each other. We only send an engineer to their place to quality control, but we don't have any factory cost. And then the blocks can be assembled also in 4 days to make one house, for example. So it is a handmade version of a high-speed housing solution. Because the handmade is only so that people can carry the blocks, we don't need energy, they can rely on themselves. And the pieces can stay in the different houses. There are molds in other people's houses. So when we have to assemble a house, the same bullock cart or truck goes and picks everything and assemble in 3 or 4 days. And these colors are embedded like stucco into the cement. So you have to only wax it and there is no maintenance and all these things. Like there you see on the left side, it is a kitchen counter embedded in the block. So all the infrastructure is also inside. This is the same block somebody's used as an office. And similarly, I'm doing, because in India still we don't have sanitation for all the people. So this is a toilet block which can be assembled in a day. There are 4 pieces, you bolt them. So finally, I want to end with the fact that, nowadays I've been invited a lot to do installations in Venice Biennale and many places in the world. I'm using the installation in collaboration with universities so they become opportunities to build knowledge, because so much money is spent in an installation. A lot of people could learn things in full scale. So I'll just show you some examples. We collaborated here with the Technical University in Germany to do this, to check this ferrocement research. First of all, we would have never managed to pay the research of the German engineers, the testing of to see how it works. But because of this installation, we can do a collaboration. They do this knowledge combined with us. We take the Indian craftsmen to them, produce everything in our style, get it load tested. You see the performance. They are shocked how it doesn't, the seismic qualities, because it's so ductile, concrete would have broken. So this gives us confidence, and this knowledge could only be generated from the budget of an installation. So in the end, people saw the Venice project, but they did not see what I took back. What I took back is the assurance that these housing stands the earthquake. It's a big thing for me, to instead of just going and showing my old works in exhibition. And here you see in Venice, when I was asked to do this year, I first looked at the waste that another installation of last year will produce. So I did only 6 elements from the German collaboration, and all the rest I did with waste material of the previous ones. I looked at all the project, I phoned them, can I take your material? Of course, they have to pay to give it. So I use it for free. I'm always trying to take for free the material, and the labor through knowledge you manage, and then what you really focus on is knowledge for everybody. So here you see now, we did a lot of workshops. Our students in Venice have been thinking after the exhibition what happens to that, all that we build. So the local areas have been identified, who needs the house, who is going to take it, and how we are going to make another project to, after our exhibition, give it in a sensible way. This is how we are working, and the process involves all types of people, interdisciplinary, intercultural, engineers. These are people in the Venice experiment, 20 Australians, 10 Italian students, Indian craftsmen, engineers, and everybody, and all of this being built by scratch by students, with learning to do everything. So in 6 weeks, they know from design to construction. We had built, the whole thing. So I don't know how much time we have finished. How many minutes? We have some time? Okay. This is what I showed you now is the process. The roots. I showed you about the roots. Now the fruits, I don't have to comment. I just silently show you the architecture, because I like to have a little time if you want to ask me anything or comment. This is the first project I did. When I was 23 years old, I had gone out of college, really with only what I learned in college. And this is the first architecture that a Frenchman asked me to do. And I made the first pot experiments for. So this was all painted white to be cool and everything. But later, everybody said it was very Bauhaus influence, the aesthetics and all. And immediately after, when I did my own house, next project, I took out the white plaster because of the fungus that grows in tropical climates, I realized. So I didn't put the plaster. So they immediately said it's vernacular, contemporary vernacular. It was as modern, but I mean how people are judging by the color of the material. So if I do a brick building or a earth, they will say I am vernacular. This has become the easy classification. Anyway, this is, when I did this type of projects, I myself have no funds to live. I was doing a very risky life. So, I lived in a hut like a lot of people. And that was my motorbike. I had a solar panel in the roof. And I was living just with nothing, literally. But it was very good because I liberated myself from all the things I used to have in a city. And I realized I, in fact, don't need anything. And the less I have, the more time I have, in fact. So that is a space I used to think a lot, sit in the hammock, have a lot of time to think. And not, even now, I try to have at least 1 hour a day to do nothing in the morning before I do. Then I know what is important and what is not at all important to do. So I was living in this way, and some of the other houses I did were influenced by this kind of materials that other people saw, very cheap houses. This is the house which I later made for myself after living in the hut for 10 years. I was quite fine there also. This was done for absorbing my terracotta experiments, and this is the house that I'm telling you that I didn't plaster, so they said it's vernacular. The same materials there with the white plaster, they call it Bauhaus influence. So this is the houses with all the terracotta things I showed you. The panels are ferro cement. to break the screen. The bathroom with the open to sky terrace. Some of the houses have got earth pigments in the cement so that we can not have to buy those factory tiles and all that. We just infuse in the cement the natural earth colors and mix them with the wood palette and create color compositions. This is again a very contemporary house. There are a lot of elements of inside outside in my work because I think that's the main thing to design, how the human individual contacts the universe at large and the nature at large, and how to manage those transitions. If one did not know about the roots, if you look at the magazines that write about my work, they won't make the connection because it could be like any other contemporary architecture. But all the material decisions, like in these houses, has to do with all my thoughts of what I showed you before. So that's why I feel it's more and more important to talk about the roots rather than the fruits, because the fruits, you can draw a very different conclusion with the same pictures. What is interesting is that the high budget house for that French architect, French guy whom I did, the same for the low cost, the lowest low cost, the same technology is the cheapest. So I think it's very important to bridge and not to always have the budget in the face, of the, to have the different societies. I'm working a lot with trying to make very luxurious spaces out of the same materials that the very poor people, I'm offering them, These systems I showed you before, the bigger the span, the bigger the economy. Then you don't have to have the beam to support it because of the type of slab, and the hot air can escape. This is a housing project, a prototype for urban eco-community, done with the rammed earth, open streets at high levels for housing and community. These technologies are very rationally used for saving high energy materials and quantities. This is a hostel building. All these are very low cost projects. This is another very low cost library building in a quite poor area actually. They have also Braille books. This is a town hall complex in Auroville. There is a lot of engineering and dealing with spans, roofing systems and all that. There's a lot of technologies, but still the attention is on the spaces somehow, the bathrooms, areas. This is a common pavilion. This is entirely made in reinforced concrete, but there were 3 or 4 designs. The one selected was finally using 1/3 the volume of concrete than the other designs. So that's why this was used. So I think sustainability is not only about which material, but the total net result of the space. This is what came out of the project which I showed you, the stone cutters who cut by hand. This is all self-balanced. Interiors of a very luxurious storeroom. They in fact gave me this project because they associated my work with luxury. That is so nice compliment, because mostly people are talking about affordability, but this Italian curators, they found that the spaces are luxurious, and it was a luxury store for handmade, handcrafted designer products from India that has to be contemporary. So I made the space also handcrafted. Undulating slabs in stone. And here is what happened with the books project in Barcelona. See, we cut all those trees to make books, and then we are not using the books. So I made the trees back, symbolically, because the trees take long time to grow. So we create these spaces. And again, when you leave this place, it's just an installation. You did not deplete any materials. You took what was existing. You create knowledge with universities and local partners. This is the bathroom exhibited in Zaha Hadid's Roca London Gallery. And in fact, the inauguration happened just the day before, the day before she died, in fact. That was very sad. But even this is fitted into that space. It was an exhibition of high-speed housing and ferrocement Roca had done. And Roca, because it has all these fancy toilets, I thought, let me take my cheap toilet there and put it there. It was a funny idea for me. And this is, I'm ending with two installations that I have recently done. This was the David Chipperfield installation, which was, I think, the most ambitious project because the whole house was built inside the house in Venice. And all the terracotta, the theme was common ground, and I wanted to show that we have more in common than difference with everybody, you know. Even though the building was planned for South India, I will look more like it belongs in Venice, in the old architecture of Venice. It will fit even better than the Venetian bricks of today. So I wanted to bring the brick, it's a brick city, so I want to bring my brick research there. And I wanted everything in full scale so that people realize that architecture should not be only discussed through renderings and models, but by inhabiting the space with a body. Otherwise, they are writing too much about the technology or about the form or the shape. If you go with your whole body, you have a balanced view on the space. So I was very much insisting on doing that. We did everything, the garden, the space. In fact, here also we were placed just opposite Zaha Hadid, no, beside Zaha Hadid. And David Chipperfield wanted to create a kind of confrontation about this kind of issues. And see, there you see behind the table is the Zaha Hadid sculpture in metal. And this space, he gave me a very, very huge spot there because I was doing the full-scale project. And there I wanted to show that architecture, the common ground of architecture is in the making. The moment you see the making and the number of hands that are involved from the day that somebody made a brick, the people who made the cement, if you count all the hands, the whole society is involved in architecture. And that's why it really concerns everyone. I wanted to show that in the common ground. This is last year's Biennale where we installed, it was called Reporting from the Front and the Battle for Better Environments. So what I did is, I tried to, on the left side, I put all the spatial non-material research of architecture, and on the right side I put all the material research because I wanted to say there is a battle between the materiality and the space, and we have to, a good architect should, it's about the synthesis of both. You don't have to have a battle. When the duality can work together, there is enrichment. If you put it against each other, there is a battle. So that was my point. And I was saying architects have the capacity to synthesize these dualities, because that's the whole thing about architecture, is we know how to integrate different subjects into a holistic result. So I put the house and the toilet in the center. And you see little circular windows because in Berlin we had the opportunity to experiment with very different meshes, natural fibers, glass fiber, carbon fiber, and everything, so that we can take the technology to the highest level. So the high tech and the low tech all has to be explored. And we had an area where there was people could live tweet. It was called live knowledge. The emphasis was put on knowledge, that the only way to win the battle is by putting attention in the consciousness and knowledge. Knowledge must lead the action. Never action must influence the knowledge. That was my point, with which I would like to actually end and say that, you know, we we believe a lot in material research, and we think it is not only something about the thinking mentally, it is the human life is about all human values, about happiness, about using our body and mind and heart together in a synthetic whole. And this is the interior, with which I want to just stay one small comment. I think beauty is also a very important need for Homo sapiens. All of us, either we are rich, poor, or whatever it is, all of us like to have something more than the rational, more than the food, you know, jewelry or flowers we like to have. It shows that we crave for beauty in words, beauty in action, beauty in thoughts. And we must not make beauty only related to high budget people. Everybody needs it. And I think that it's important the architects put their service for all and try to achieve beauty for all. And like I said, the big budget does not ensure a better movie. I think sometimes when you have very small budget, you can, like this, you can in fact, have more chance to be successful because all the extra things are removed and you get this austere aesthetics which they had also in the Bauhaus times. So we should, I definitely put a lot of emphasis on trying to achieve beauty that is not only skin deep, but from deep inside the human soul and progress in collectively in the planet. Thank you. Do you have time for some questions? Good. Or comments if you want.
No. Thank you for the great presentation. And I had a quick search about your residence projects on your website, and I saw that most of them located at Oroville. And then I wondered about Oroville. What kind of place it is? Is it a place that you can build that kind of sustainable projects?
Yeah.
Or?
Oroville was planned in 1968, inaugurated under the Human Resource Development as an experimental project. A plan. It was called like a laboratory to experiment on cities. So it is Oroville is a planned city with a very small population, 50,000. It's not yet achieved. It is a pioneering project where people are planning the whole, they are researching new society, new ways of education and everything. The government of India and UNESCO and many bodies support that. So there is a aspect of experimentation that is encouraged. The chief architect was Roger Anger, a very interesting, genius French architect who was selected. I wrote a book on him as well called Research on Beauty. And yes, I think that the place has somehow created, or the chief architect has done experiments, early experiments there, that it has a pioneering kind of spirit still, not as much as the early days, but it began with a lot of experimentation, and it was a conducive area to do a lot of the laboratory things.
It's a very inspiring place. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this wonderful talk. That your answer covers my question as well.
Oh, it was about Oroville.
Thank you.
Okay. You have? No? No. Yeah, here is the question. Okay.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I was delighted. I wonder if you have any future or maybe ongoing experiments about building materials on other places on Earth, other than India or Africa.
I feel a lot of the developing countries have the same type of things, because in India we have so many different climates. We have actually all the climates represented. So having worked extensively in India, I have worked in hilly, cold areas where we have to use wood, or places of stone. And so I think there is some kind of a common experience generated that allows me to approach problems elsewhere. But I must say honestly that I have mostly practiced in India. My shifting to Europe or being in America, Australia, etc. has been related to my other side. One foot is in the practice, one foot is in academia. So I found that in those environments, it was more interesting to have the right environment to advance on the academic part or formal research, academic research. But still, I think for testing, there are many reasons why it's very expensive here to do, because it's not easy to do the experiments that are necessary. But even now, when I am based in Madrid, I have my practice, I have an office in Madrid and in India, but most of the projects are located in India because of the simple fact that those countries are developing and in a speed, and those projects are offered compared to what is happening in Europe. So the most of the other things I've done internationally have been through invitations to showcase installations and so on. Like even the Barcelona thing, it was only for 4 months. So all that in the last 10 years, I have done things in other places, even research on Africa, etc., for displaying in Milan or, things like that. But I use those opportunities with my students to generate local knowledge in about those European contexts or wherever those works are. Even in the US, I did, when I was teaching at Parsons, I did things in New York. But those are, I think, not the mainstream architecture that I've done. If I get a project, then it will show. But
Okay, thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you for the great presentation. I'm also wondering about because you mostly talk about the rural peripheries actually. How can we imply this architecture in more urban places like maybe Mumbai?
Actually, yes, I have to mention that the actual architecture has been in the rural areas because I left Bombay and started my practice in Auroville. But my formative years and thinking I'm always thinking about the big picture that is informing my small project. And even the last project I showed you about the high-speed housing blocks, this is actually meant to do high-speed construction inside the columns of high-rise buildings, because I feel there is also a problem if one only glamorizes, say, bamboo and earth and all that, because of the population I showed you before. I acknowledge very much so that in these kind of, the technology must not reduce the density. Just because we cannot go higher is also not good, because we have to keep the cities compact. So I do believe in the need for that, and all the ferrocement work you see, it is actually meant for the cities. There are two lines of work in mind. I am working on a lot of rural areas are getting rapidly urbanized. So these projects are not in just in villages. They are in urbanizing situation where the typical urban architect is introducing too much of a industrialized solution that is alienating those people. So in those areas, I'm trying to have an intervention where the people of the place can participate in a sensible way. Those are urbanizing. I believe that you have to work one step before it urbanizes that amount, But those other ferrocement elements and all that, I'm actually producing those in collaboration with the German engineering for the high-speed area, because I'm trying to look at high speed but low quantity of materials, at the same time allowing people to participate. So those three strategies, I feel, even in the biggest cities, it should be possible. Because I lived in one of the parts when I was teaching, I lived in Berlin for 5 years. And during there, after the wall, I learned that from Germany actually, that they made such good policies of self-participation. When they had to renovate the buildings of the East, in a very normal city like Berlin, other European cities should do that, but they don't. Berlin had made a policy called Help Yourself policy, Selbsthilfe, in which the renovation of the housing would be given 80% of funding if the people who live in them would pay 20% and own their houses. So we as architects had to give them at least 20% of the work should be possible for them to do of the total project. But then each guy could decide if he works 80% or 60, whatever time he has. But we have to think of that. And I think that the mistake we make in cities is we just for some reason we feel now it's a city so we don't need to build. That is not a direct logic in that. So I would like to transfer the same thinking. Strategies are same, architecture would be different.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much for the presentation. It was really wonderful.
I just want to ask if you have any available documentation that show the process of building with these materials, that even locals can examine and learn how to implement these things in their local buildings.
No, actually, I must say that there isn't much documentation, and I must also tell you it's very difficult to sustain economically a practice like mine. There is a lot of money to all kind of publications, but it is not, the truth is that our generation is not investing in knowledge. That is unfortunately the truth. And a lot of books that would be produced is like through vanity press. I do not have that office where I will produce just to promote my practice. So if there is something relevant, I believe the society or some organization or somebody, if they feel my work is relevant, the proof will be in wanting this publication. So for many, many years, I have been approached by publishers also, and many times they were of a nature of more of self-promotion, collaborations, and I am not so interested in that. I am teaching in my own way through my students, through people who participated and they are doing. But I agree that the time has come to have a publication. There are two things that are going to come out soon. One is I have an exhibition on my ferrocement work in September in Berlin. And there is an organization who makes all these fancy handles, FSB, I don't know if you know. They are producing a publication only on, I gave them only this because I prefer to do deeply one thing than to just write everything superficially. But in 2020, in Copenhagen, in the Louisiana Museum of Modern Art, there is a big solo show I'm going to have, and then there is going to be a publication finally planned of the level with which you can go in depth. So latest in 2020, there will be something. Okay. Other than that, we have to wait for, if somebody is interested, they have to write and research and do. I can't do alone.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so I think no more questions, right? So thank you all for listening, and thanks for inviting me here. It was a pleasure to be in this great city in Istanbul. Thank you.